Story 1. Apparently, she had a boyfriend who showed up in the middle of the date and joined them. I wasn't into all that. This was almost 20 years ago. Story 2. First date at a pub. Good conversation and there was chemistry. I went to the bathroom, and when I returned, I couldn't find her at our table. I found her at the bar kissing a random guy. I just walked past them and went home. I received many calls and texts from her while I was on the train. Why did you leave me there? I thought it was going well. Did I get too drunk? I'm sorry. I simply replied, you know exactly why I left, and then blocked her number. Story 3. Within the first 15 minutes of sitting down, I asked, do you like movies? He replied, yes, pornographic movies. Then he moved to my side of the table and began pressuring me to go for a walk outside, away from everyone. Story 4. I attended an event with a friend for her work and met a handsome and charming man who asked me out for that weekend. We went to a lovely restaurant, chatted, had drinks, and had just ordered our food when he told me he had something to say. He then admitted he was married. I asked why he asked me out if he was married, and he said he was afraid I wouldn't go out with him if I knew, adding that I was so beautiful he couldn't pass up the opportunity. I replied that he was right. I wouldn't have agreed to go out with him and stood up to leave. He accused me of being rude for leaving after we had already ordered. I was shocked that he had the audacity to call me rude for leaving. About a year later, I received a text from him saying he was getting divorced and now that he was single, he wanted to go out with me again. How arrogant to think I was just waiting for him to be available. And why would I want to date someone I know has no issue cheating on their partner? Ridiculous. Story 5. He loudly and obnoxiously kept ordering cocktails and shooters with sexual names, took a sip, didn't like them, and tried to get me to drink them by suggestively saying things like, I'm giving you an orgasm, while attempting to hand me a drink named Orgasm, or annoying the waitress by asking her, give me a blowjob, I mean the cocktail, then wagging his eyebrows. He was laughing and being really loud while everyone else was annoyed and uncomfortable. After he ordered the third drink in less than 20 minutes, I got up and left. I don't think I even said anything to him. I just left. A cute guy who witnessed the whole thing came out after me to ask if I would like him to walk me home, just in case my date decided to harass me. We dated for a while, but it didn't work out romantically. He's still one of my closest friends, though. Story 6. The man had exhumed his ex-wife's deceased dog to cremate it as a wedding gift. It was wrapped in a blanket in the backyard, which he showed me. Story 7. 15 minutes into the date, she still wouldn't look up from her phone. I got up and left, and I'm not sure she even noticed. Story 8. She arrived already drinking and quickly consumed premium skinny margaritas. When I went to the restroom, she informed the bartender that I was paying and could drive her home. It was a bar I often visited, and I knew the bartenders. After she ordered her third drink in less than 30 minutes and went to the bathroom, I told the bartender I was leaving, gave him cash to cover my one beer, and asked him to text me if she didn't pay her tab. I don't have the patience for that behavior. Story 9. I had a date at a restaurant, and she treated the server like garbage. She was rude and talked negatively about them. All I could think about was that if this is how she treats people, then I would likely be treated badly in 2 to 5 months. She started to complain about her first few bites. I got up and said I'd take care of it. I walked up to the host, explained what was happening, settled the bill, and then returned to the table. I told my date that I had settled the bill, was leaving, and said this isn't for me. She went into mild hysterics, explaining how I wasted her time. I basically reiterated my earlier points. She was attractive, formally educated, and we shared some interests. Maybe I just caught her on a bad day. But treating staff poorly when they haven't done anything wrong is a big no in my eyes. Story 10. I arrived dressed nicely with my hair done and was in peak form in my 20s. The man was at least 10 years older than the photo I had seen, didn't resemble the image, or sound like the person I had been talking to on the phone. He was severely overweight, wearing a dirty t-shirt and sweatpants, and said, "Oh, you'll be having an appetizer at most. I thought you were thinner." There was no greeting, no introduction, not even a handshake. I am pretty sure I was misled, but I turned around and left without saying a word. He blocked me before I got home, but after sending a message saying, "You don't know how good you had it." Yes, I missed out on questionable fashion choices and someone who was obviously dishonest and unpleasant. Story 11. She lied about her appearance, fitness level, smoking status, drinking status, and job. Her smell became evident before she arrived, indicating her smoking habit. She had been sectioned twice for alcoholism. Additionally, she was a doctor who had lost her license and was not currently working. Story 12. I met a girl through a dating app, and she was quite insufferable. She was aggressive and rude, constantly talking about the app, other users, and the dates she had been on. At one point, she mentioned that if she felt no connection, she would just get up and leave because her time was too valuable to waste. I thought, wouldn't it be funny if I got up and left? I asked her if she needed money for a taxi because I was leaving. The look on her face was priceless. Story 13. I made the mistake of going to his place for dinner. The food was good, and the conversation was okay. However, afterward, when we were going to watch a movie, I went to the bathroom. When I came back, he had pulled out the sofa bed and started playing a pornographic film. I picked up my purse and left, blocking him everywhere. Fortunately, he never knew where I lived. Story 14. She asked me how much I make in a strangely demanding way. She was also generally rude and standoffish, so I went to the bathroom and just left. There are plenty of opportunities out there. Story 15. We met through a dating app and talked briefly before agreeing to meet in person. Upon our first meeting, I noticed her surveying me from head to toe. Then she made a face as if she had something unpleasant on her lip and offered a very unenthusiastic handshake. I had made a solid effort to present myself accurately in my pictures and biography. She knew exactly what I looked like before this meeting, and to be objective, I would say I am above average in appearance. So her reaction was quite jarring. I sat down and tried to start a conversation, but it felt like pulling teeth. By the time the drinks arrived, I stood up and told her, "This clearly isn't going to work. Have a wonderful evening." I then took my drink to the bar to enjoy it alone. That night, I actually made a good friend with another guy who was also drinking alone because his former partner had brought him to that restaurant to end their relationship. Story 16. We had been messaging for a couple of weeks, and things were going great. Our schedules finally matched up, and we agreed to get sushi at my favorite sushi bar near my house. I offered to pay for dinner, and she offered to drive us. She showed up almost an hour late, and when I got into the car, she put it in reverse and backed out of my driveway without looking, driving into oncoming traffic. She just laughed it off. Fortunately, the sushi place was only a couple of blocks away because I soon realized she was heavily under the influence. When we arrived at the restaurant, where I am a regular and friendly with the staff, she was absolutely rude to everyone and demanded omuras, which was not on the menu. The staff were polite and actually made it for her, but she showed no gratitude. She then spent the rest of the meal talking about how she was going to be the designated driver for her friends after dinner, even though our date plans extended beyond that. I excused myself, went to pay the check, and apologized for her behavior, informing them that she would never be returning with me again. I returned to the table, told her to have fun with her friends, and walked home. Story 17. She made fun of me for putting a napkin in my lap, saying only women do that. I asked her why. She explained that she has nice clothes on and doesn't want to get food on them. I noted that I do it for the same reason. She then commented that my clothes are just men's clothes and spent an additional 10 minutes discussing how feminine it is for a man to put a napkin in his lap. Story 18. She was incredibly unpleasant, speaking poorly about her family and people who weren't wealthy, treating our server like a servant rather than as someone I would have preferred to enjoy a drink with. It was shocking how she changed from being attractive when I walked in to absolutely repulsive in about 20 minutes. When she asked where I wanted to go for dinner, I told her that we weren't a good match and that our time would be better spent elsewhere. I informed her that I had paid for the drinks while I used the restroom and hoped she had a good night. She became quiet and apologized, saying she was nervous and that it wasn't her true self. I politely acknowledged her nerves but explained that I would not change my decision. I stood up, wished her the best, and left. She sent me a lengthy text that started with, "What you failed to understand with your simple worldview." I deleted it and blocked her. I hope she receives help, talks to someone, or finds a community where she feels she belongs. I also hope that if she does find her people, I never have to encounter them. Story 19. A guy who was 100 pounds heavier than his profile pictures, which would have been fine had he been honest about it. Hadn't cut his hair in 4 years, hadn't showered in 2 weeks, and had never heard of deodorant. I stayed for one drink and then said I had to leave, to which he replied, "Oh, I thought we were going to have sex. I'll just go home and masturbate again then." Story 20. I went on a date with a girl for drinks. She found out I used to run marathons and lectured me about them for half an hour, even though she had never run before. I went to the bathroom but ended up on the patio and just left. Story 21. She confronted the waiter about where he seated us. We never ordered drinks, so I just left. I have no respect for those who cannot respect others. Story 22. Yes, he had a noticeable hickey on the side of his neck. He openly explained that it was a hickey from a night at the club and not the result of an obscure injury. Story 23. I was supposed to meet a guy for a drink. He didn't bother to leave for the date until I texted that I was there. As I was waiting for him, I sat at the bar chatting with basically everyone, including the bartender. I'm just that kind of person. While I was chatting, a guy sat down beside me. I said hi, but he didn't answer, so I went back to chatting. Turns out this was my date, who was annoyed that I was being friendly with others. He had to one-up everything. I love to cook. He was trained as a chef and thought everything I did was wrong. I am a master gardener, but he believed my ideas on gardening were incorrect and told me so. I have children, and he has never even been married. He thought I was raising my kids poorly. The final straw came when we were discussing cooking. He insisted on only buying primal cuts of meat and breaking them down. I explained this was fine, but when I come home at 8 p.m. with children who have just finished multiple hours of gymnastics and martial arts, I need some nice chicken breasts to prepare a decent meal quickly. He went off on me, criticizing me for being a bad mother for letting my children be out at lessons so late. He claimed that if I weren't so irresponsible, I would have plenty of time to cook them decent food. My kids were 12 and 15 at the time. They were not toddlers who weren't getting enough sleep. I stood up and announced to the whole bar, "This really isn't going to work out. I know why you're single." The bartender told me not to worry about paying for my soda. I waved to everyone and walked out. Story 24. I was probably 28 years old. She was roughly the same age. She showed up at a laid-back neighborhood bar a few minutes after me. The night was going well and we were having fun. I thought this was going great, and I could not wait to see her again. She left to go to the bathroom. No big deal at all. She came back maybe 10 minutes later, which was a little long, but who am I to judge someone's bathroom break? She was clearly under the influence of something. It wasn't alcohol and it wasn't marijuana. She was out of it. I've seen enough people go down that disastrous path, and I wanted nothing to do with it. I stood up, paid the tab, and walked out the front door. She followed for a bit, yelling some awful things. Bullet dodged is an understatement. Story 25. I went on a date that I thought was going well until about half an hour in when I offered to get us more drinks and she just said no. She was going to go home. I was confused but sent a standard message saying, "Nice to meet you. Hope you got home okay." And it turned out she thought I wasn't interested. So she decided to leave rather than waste her time. Anyway, we got married in 2019 and have 2 kids now. Always send a follow-up message if you're interested, even if you don't think they are. You never know what might happen. Story 26. She called me every name in the book after a very good date because I didn't want to pay for additional food for her 2 children at home. I knew she had kids, but I think it's ridiculous to act like that and cause a scene because your date doesn't want to buy $50 worth of seafood to take home on top of the original $87 for the date. Story 27. I suggested we go for a cup of coffee, but she insisted on dinner at an upscale restaurant. I wouldn't mind not having to cook. However, it quickly felt like a job interview. She kept asking about my salary, career ambitions, and more. I grew tired of it fast, and when it was time to pay, she said the man should always pay for everything. She had ordered quite expensive food, so I excused myself to the restroom. I went to the bar, paid my portion, and left. I blocked her. I'm sorry, but I'm not a walking ATM. Story 28. I arranged to meet a guy at a coffee shop after we both finished work for a coffee and a bite to eat. When I went to pay for mine, he insisted on covering the bill. We were talking, and I mentioned I was semi-ambidextrous. I was born left-handed, but my primary school teacher held my hand behind my back and forced me to use my right hand. So now I have poor dexterity with both hands. I had maybe 2 sips of my coffee when he went into detail about how he masturbates with both hands and how his non-dominant hand feels different, among other things. I was completely creeped out. I pretended to get a text from someone who needed me immediately, got the barista to put my coffee in a to-go cup, and had my food packaged up. The coffee shop was just outside the train station, so I thought I'd make a quick escape. He followed me to the station and continued his conversation about his habits. It was just after the work rush, so it was just me, him, and maybe 3 other people at the station. My train was in 10 minutes, and I barely responded to him, giving short answers and only nodding when possible since I was terrified he would think I was interested. When my train was announced, I went to the platform, which thankfully required a pre-purchased ticket. He then leaned in to kiss me, and I dodged, resulting in an awkward hug where he squeezed me so hard I lost my breath. I've never been happier to get on a train in my life. I don't date anymore for various reasons, but that was by far the worst first date I've been on. Story 29. I had a date with a man I met on a cruise. I reluctantly agreed to go out with him because he was a mutual friend and practically begged me. I told him I was not ready as I had just gotten out of a relationship. When we got to the restaurant, he was aggressive and rude to the waiter when he came to take our order, saying something like, "Do you think you could give us some time to talk in private?" Luckily, I had met him at the restaurant. I excused myself to the restroom, went out a side door to the patio, walked away, and never saw or heard from him again. Story 30. I was deceived when I met her at a bar. She was at least 100 pounds heavier than her pictures. I was honest with her about not appreciating her lying to me. I thanked her for her time and left. Story 31. She was on her phone the whole time and seemed uninterested in any conversation. I excused myself to the restroom and was away for a while. She texted me asking where I went, and I simply responded, "You seemed busy." First dates don't usually go that way. Story 32. I was in college and met a cute guy at my graduation ceremony. We agreed to go out for coffee at a Starbucks next to a local university. The only problem was there were 2 Starbucks on opposite ends of campus. He went to one and I went to the other. When we figured it out, the first words out of his mouth were, "You're really bad at this getting together thing, but it gets worse." He then proceeded to tell me that I picked a major that's easy to drop for family, that he wants me to be a stay-at-home mom and have 7 children, and he would fund all of this with his online gambling business. I made an excuse, left early, and he called me to say that I wasn't girlfriend material. 3 months later, he called back to ask for a second chance and had the audacity to tell me he was having a bad day on our date and I was being mean for not giving him another chance. Story 33. When my mom started dating again, after my parents had split many years before, she matched with a guy who seemed nice and they agreed to meet up at a local pub. She got there first. When he arrived, he had come straight from work. Unfortunately, he worked at a duck farm, was covered in bird droppings, and smelled exactly as one would expect. The whole pub was sniffing and staring. After this experience, my mom didn't date again for a while. Story 34. I said goodbye to a date. We met on a dating app, but I can't remember which one. The guy kept talking down to me and seemed to have a negative response to everything I said. He criticized my job, my taste in movies, and even called me vain when I mentioned how it was a bit odd that the restaurant's bathroom didn't have a mirror. When I couldn't take it any longer, I excused myself to the bathroom again, but instead of actually going there, I headed for the exit and blocked him on everything as I walked back to my car. Story 35. I have experienced this several times after noticing concerning behavior, and once after witnessing a man add something to my drink before bringing it from the bar. Story 36. Several. One told me he was married with a toddler, but we have an understanding. I dismissed him, left a $10 bill for my glass of wine, and told him he was a liar and a cheater. I never heard from him again. One had uncomfortable expectations for his partner. I left a $20 bill and walked out, ignoring his desperate messages. One started talking about his ex-girlfriend, revealing his unresolved anger. He was not ready to move on and was seeking emotional support he should have gotten from a therapist. After our first drinks, when he asked if I was ready to order, I said I wasn't feeling the vibe and needed to go home. He messaged me repeatedly, calling me a slut and a tease, which was contradictory, and I blocked him. Story 37. He started right off the bat with how he thinks piercings and tattoos on women are disgusting. I have a nose ring and a few tattoos which were visible in my profile pictures. Story 38. I took a girl out and I could tell she was just using me for a nice dinner. I ordered an unusual dish, which I was fine with until she tried to order a take-home dinner. I went to the manager and paid the bill for her food and mine, but not the take-home order and only 2 of her drinks. Then I quietly left her there. It may have been a bad move, but I still feel good about it years later. Story 39. The first thing she said, before I even sat down, was, "How much does a master mason make?" A red flag was raised. Lower the sails, everyone. This ship is sailing in the other direction. Story 40. Yes, a few times. The last incident was because he was a smoker. He explicitly stated that he did not smoke. We met on an app and had an extensive conversation about my asthma and the fact that I cannot be around smokers. I was raised in a smoking household and on corticosteroids for years to literally survive the effects. Due to that, I am extremely sensitive to the smell now. It triggers asthma attacks that require hospital visits. It is frustrating. I showed up and he took out cigarettes to step outside and smoke at the restaurant. He smiled sheepishly and said that he was trying to quit. I walked out and left. Story 41. She brought 2 of her friends to dinner without telling me first. She quietly paid for my meal and slipped out. Story 42. Everything she said was negative from the moment she got in the car. We arrived at the restaurant, and she realized she had forgotten her purse or phone and wanted to go back home to get it. Once we returned to her house and she closed the door, I left. She texted me once to say, "What the heck?" And I never heard from her again. Story 43. He gave off unsettling vibes. I don't know how else to explain it. It was so bad that the waiter noticed my uncomfortable expression, or perhaps he felt it too. He came to the table every few minutes, checking on me specifically. After 30 minutes, I left. Story 44. He started talking about his firearms and that the federal authorities are trying to put him on a list related to the Second Amendment. I told him I had to go to the grocery store and left. Story 45. He started telling me how his ex had accused him of a crime, which wasn't true, and that she had stolen his Warhammer figurines. Then he said he had no money and was going to run to the nearest ATM to get some, asking me to sit with his friends until he returned. It turned out his friends were a table over watching us. I greeted his friends, explained why I was leaving, and then left. Story 46. He gave me the biggest red flag vibes I've ever experienced. If you wrote a transcript of our conversation, it would look normal. But every cell in my body was screaming at me to get away from him. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see him in the news as a serial killer. Story 47. 1. Catfished. It turns out he used his cousin's photo on his dating profile. 2. Drunkard. He was definitely drinking before I arrived. He tried to get me drunk even though he knew I was driving. He wanted to make out aggressively. 3. Married. He wore a wedding ring on our date, which he was not wearing when we met, and thought I would be okay with it. I suggested he go to couples counseling. Story 48. She didn't read my profile, which clearly stated that I have kids, and she made a big deal about it. I got up and left. Story 49. I knew from the moment we met in person that it wasn't a match. He apparently didn't feel the same way and kept trying to kiss me. We were going to watch a hockey game, and during the warm-up, I couldn't stand it anymore. Instead of being uncomfortable for the entire game, I chose to be honest and said I didn't feel a connection. I told him he could stay or leave, but the date was over and I would be sitting somewhere else. Since then, he has reliked me every time he has seen me on an app. Story 50. The place we went to, she saw her dad's friend, and we had to act like we were strangers. Story 51. She looked at the bartender, sighed, and asked to leave. I asked her if he was an ex or something, and she replied no. People like that shouldn't be around civilized individuals. I don't know if it was a poor attempt at a joke or if she seriously believed it, but I just walked out. Also, this is the UK, not the deep south of America or similar. Story 52. He sat there in silence while I asked him about 60 questions over the course of an hour, and he did not ask me anything in return. The idea of spending another 3 hours with him was quite difficult. I gave him some money for his gas to get home and said goodbye. Story 53. After seeing a movie, I asked if she wanted to grab a drink, to which she responded, "Yeah, but at this pub." Fair enough. We got there, and her brother, sister, and her sister's boyfriend just so happened to be there. They spoke amongst themselves for an hour without inviting me into the conversation. After that hour, I said, "Nature's calling. Be right back." I walked out the door and never saw her again. Story 54. I went to a bar for some drinks and everything was fine. Afterward, I went to his house. He offered me a glass of water and mentioned he had a filter jug with lemon water. But he spent a while in the kitchen without turning on the tap. The water tasted a little odd. I wasn't sure if it was just the lemon or something else, so I only had a few sips and made an excuse to leave. It was probably nothing, but I felt a strange vibe, and he wasn't very engaging to talk to anyway. Story 55. She used old photos that did not represent her current self. I said I was going to the restroom and just left. To me, she lied, so I figured I could too. Story 56. She was out for happy hour, and I met her at the bar. It was a huge mistake. She was excessively drunk, and she had been that way during a phone call a week prior. I was very annoyed. Story 57. Does it have to be an actual first date? A friend randomly texted me asking if I wanted lunch. I hadn't seen her in a while, so I was open to it. I arrived at about 12:30 on a workday, dressed like an insecure entry-level data analyst. My friend was there, dressed like the female version of me. However, she had a friend with her who was much more polished. Nice hair, makeup, jewelry, and a hint of cleavage. After we ordered, my friend suddenly disappeared, and her friend started getting very smiley and flirty, asking personal questions. It became overwhelming, so I made an excuse to leave. It turned out my friend's friend had just gone through a breakup, and my friend was trying to set her up in a cliché romantic comedy way. I told her to never do that again. I was looking forward to seeing her because I value our friendship. Instead, I ended up in an awkward situation. I said that next time she wanted to set me up, she should send me her social media profiles, a picture, and her thoughts on why we would be compatible. It never happened again. Story 58. Absolutely. I met up with a woman from Tinder a while ago. We planned to have drinks at a local place, nothing fancy. I took a seat at the bar since she was running a bit late and wanted it to feel casual. I explained what I was wearing and waited. About 15 minutes later, she walked in, introduced herself, and sat down. She looked nothing like the pictures on her profile. As an attorney, I expected her to be fairly well-groomed. However, the person who showed up was at least 100 pounds heavier than the photos and looked like she had just rolled out of bed, wearing sweatpants and a hoodie. I greeted her, then told her I needed to use the restroom. On my way to the back, I saw the bartender and slipped him $20 for my drink. I explained what had happened, we both laughed, and I walked out the back door and went home. I'm usually a nice person, but I don't appreciate being catfished. I was polite enough to text her that I wouldn't be coming back, but I immediately blocked her number so I wouldn't see her response. That experience ended online dating for me for nearly 5 years. Story 59. I saw a guy we know on a first date. They were sitting at the bar in a fancy steakhouse. My wife has always thought he was extremely chauvinistic. By the time the meal arrived, the date had decided to take hers to go. Story 60. Didn't look anything like her picture. No, I'm not just being shallow. You started us off with a lie, which is the number one red flag. Story 61. Nothing dramatic. I met a woman on a dating app. We got along well through messages, but there was no chemistry in person. Trying to engage her in conversation was very difficult. After 30 minutes of failed attempts, I said, "This doesn't seem like it's going well. I don't see a reason for us to force it. Let me walk you back to your car." I walked her back to her car, then returned to the bar and had a great time. Story 62. She started casually using racial slurs while a group of about 25 black individuals was sitting at the table behind her. I didn't know this woman, but the rest of the room didn't know that. I thought I was going to die that day. I received the bill and left quickly. It was one of the most disturbing and embarrassing moments of my life. Thankfully, nobody but me heard the slurs. Otherwise, I might not have been able to share this story. Story 63. He told me he was not accepting of gay people or gay marriage. This came up because my sibling is gay and married. I immediately said it wasn't going to work and left. He had also been late for our scheduled date near where he lived, so I had to drive further and wait for him. Story 64. He made me watch a 3.5-hour Korean film in a stuffy art house theater with terrible seats. By the time it was finally over, I had a severe migraine, so I left. Story 65. She was just so uninformed. We were discussing what made us attracted to a partner, and I mentioned that I love it when someone talks about something they are passionate about and I can see the light in their eyes. She seriously asked me if I meant I was shining a flashlight in their eyes. I double-checked to see if she was making a joke. She was confused about what I thought she would be joking about. I made an excuse and left. Story 66. We agreed that we would split the bill evenly, but then she tried to make me pay for the entire meal. I excused myself to the bathroom and left. There's no way I'm paying $300 for the whole meal when we had agreed to go 50-50. Story 67. I went to a restaurant and sat down. My date asked to move seats. A few minutes later, I asked why, and she said it was because she didn't want to sit near someone of a different race than us. That was enough. Goodbye. Story 68. I went to his female best friend's house with him because her boyfriend and she were having a gathering. He blatantly flirted with her the entire time, and she flirted back. I made up an excuse about needing to leave early for work the next day and never spoke to him again. Story 69. We had talked and exchanged pictures before. While at dinner, she spent most of the time on her phone and then ordered a $200 drink. I went to the bar, paid for dinner for both of us, and walked out. She texted me that I was inconsiderate and that I wasn't boyfriend material anyway. Goodbye. Story 70. I actually walked out before even arriving at the date once. We had decided on a time and a place, and we were texting a bit while I was getting ready to leave my house when he dropped a message saying, "Oh, by the way, could you send me a full body picture before we meet up? I kind of don't like heavier girls, so I just wanted to make sure that you're not, since your profile only has face pictures." I didn't send a picture and never ended up meeting with him. Story 71. He was an application developer who traveled the world, working a few months in each country before moving on. It sounded interesting, and I thought he would have stories and experiences to share. However, he did not engage in conversation. Instead, I spent 30 minutes talking and asking him questions, only receiving one-word answers in return. I can't tolerate listening to myself for that long, and he made no effort to converse, simply expecting me to carry the conversation. Eventually, I made an excuse and left. Story 72. No, but now that I am older and have more self-respect, I look back and really wish I would have. Story 73. My mom was battling breast cancer, which is why I moved our date from noon to 3 p.m. and gave her 3 days' notice. She then told me, "If your mom is going to be the reason we can't get together, we need to address this." I got up and left. Story 74. My one and only Tinder date was at a restaurant. Whenever I tried to start a conversation, I received only one-word answers. She never stopped using her phone. After a while, I got up, found the waiter, paid for my half of the meal, and left. Half an hour later, she flooded my phone with messages asking where I had gone. when I had left, and how she was supposed to pay for the meal. Eventually, I blocked her and uninstalled the app. Story 75. In college, we walked outside her building. She said, "Hold on," went behind the bushes, squatted down, and relieved herself. I looked at her and said, "No thanks. This isn't for me. Best of luck." I got in my car and left. Story 76. She was pushing 15 minutes late because she was a few bars over drinking with her friends. She asked me out, by the way. After close to 20 minutes, I just left. Story 77. There was a girl in high school who arrived an hour late to the movie. When she finally sat next to me, she had an awful odor. I was shocked. I tried to see where the smell was coming from, but I couldn't in the darkness of the theater. I had to call a friend who could drive to come pick me up. I told her I was using the bathroom and never returned. Story 78. I planned a nice date at an art gallery and shared a lot of information about the exhibits. He was mostly silent. Afterward, we went to a cafe, where he remarked that it was terribly boring. He also mentioned that at 29, he lives with his mother and does not want to search for a job because he hasn't been offered anything appealing. Story 79. I took a train 70 miles to meet a girl. The date was going well. We walked around the town where she lived, had a bite to eat, chatted, got along and held hands. Then, when I leaned in to kiss her, she backed away and revealed that she had a boyfriend. I admit, I was dumbstruck and unsure how to handle the news. She wanted to spend the rest of the day together and be friends, but I was furious, to be honest. I don't think I said another word to her after that. In the next shop we visited, I waited until she went to the restroom and then left, taking the train back. No thanks, you walking bag of red flags. Story 80. I ended a date early after my companion ate my dinner while I was in the restroom. I had to drive her home, and she accidentally broke my passenger seat while trying to adjust it. Story 81. I was just bored. Nothing was connecting between us. I tried my hardest to find a connection, but there was nothing. I politely let her know when we left that I wasn't looking for anything to happen between us in the future. She asked if she could come back to my place anyway. Good times. Story 82. He brought his wife along. I was 20, he was 24, and she barely looked 18. They were looking for a third, even though his profile was all about trying to find the one. Story 83. My first date was a hike. She was cute and brought her dog, which was great. 10 minutes into the hike, her dog swallowed a chipmunk whole and alive. She laughed it off. We still had 2 hours left in the hike. It's been 10 years, and I still feel sick when I remember it. It's a funny story, though. Story 84. My husband told me a story from his dating life before meeting me. He said she simply wouldn't stop talking. He couldn't get a word in other than the occasional, yup, or something similar. Not that he's the most talkative guy, but he values balanced communication, and this was far below his expectations. According to my husband, he asked the bartender for the television remote, pointed it at his date, and hit the mute button. When she didn't stop talking, he continued to hit the mute button, looking more and more dejected. Finally, he said, "This remote is broken." At which point, she asked, "Were you trying to mute me?" Knowing the relationship wouldn't go anywhere, he stated he was trying to make a very outlandish point so she would, without question, understand the critical flaw she had regarding dating and building a relationship. It worked. She got mad. He left enough cash on the bar counter to pay for the drinks and appetizers, didn't even make it to sitting at a table to order the main course, and walked out. My husband can be a bit over the top when he wants to make a point, so this could have happened. But I understand, after writing it all out, if someone were to say, and everyone in the bar clapped, because it does sound quite fake. I wasn't there, obviously, so I'll never know. Story 85. We were on the couch watching television, and he kept getting closer to me. He pulled me against him and then started lying down on the couch. I sat through several episodes of the show. When he was almost completely lying on me horizontally, I thought, okay, that's enough. It was my fault for being 19 and naive, telling men that I preferred to stay in and cuddle rather than go out to dinner. Story 86. Hairy nose? not nostrils, and then realized he had also recently gone on a date with my best friend at the time and clearly knew we were friends, but was trying to pretend he didn't know. Story 87. I didn't even meet her. From outside the bar, I could see she looked nothing like her pictures, so I just walked off and unmatched her. Story 88. He was staring intently at a woman across the way and wouldn't stop. He found it amusing when I mentioned that it made me uncomfortable. I got up and left. Story 89. She had something negative to say about every other woman in sight. If they were attractive, she called them inappropriate names, seeking attention. If she considered them unattractive, she listed all the reasons why. It was mean-spirited and revealed her insecurity. She was friendly and polite whenever the staff was nearby, but it felt insincere and was quite off-putting. Story 90. He informed me that on our first date, after talking for a short while, he mentioned he was going to the gender reveal party for the child he was having with his ex-wife. A roach also crawled across the table in the restaurant we were at. Story 91. I was the one who got walked out on. She was quite traditional and devout. I am not religious at all, tattoos, piercings, the works. But we hit it off. She knew I had a sailor's mouth, and it didn't bother her as long as I could filter myself, which I happily did. After talking for a week or so, we went on our first date to a local coffee shop. It was a lovely place, always busy, and each table had a small potted cactus as decor. We were having a fascinating conversation, clicking considerably more than either of us had expected. I'm big on eye contact when I'm speaking to someone, which proved to be my downfall. I reached for my drink without looking and managed to wrap my hand around the cactus instead. The words that left my mouth would have made my grandmother shudder. She left without saying much, and my next message was delivered with a green status. This made for a good story, but not one of my proudest moments. Story 92. She kept talking about the job. I paid for dinner and said I had to go. We had nothing else to discuss. Story 93. She was nothing like her profile. She was loud, rude, and self-entitled. We had drinks and were ordering appetizers, but she only wanted the most expensive wine and appetizers and ordered the largest steak the restaurant had. I found out she had 2 children from 2 different men. I told the waiter to come back in a minute as I urgently needed to go to the bathroom. I got up and quickly went to the door and my car. She kept texting me for the rest of the night and well into the next day until I blocked her. Story 94. I hit it off well with this young lady. Her profile indicates she has no children, so I don't ask, and we agree from the initial coffee date. When I arrived, I was shocked to find that she had 9 kids under 10 years old. That is when she revealed that her partner was Dutch Mennonite and sadly passed away during COVID. She mentioned that she avoids disclosing the number of children she has because men tend to run away. Walking into a crowd of unexpected children made me leave quickly. It's still better than that time I played a song on a lady's Bluetooth speaker and had to escape through her bathroom window. She didn't realize what was happening until the music started cutting out as I rushed to the nearest pub for a pint and to gather my thoughts. Story 95. She was over 20 minutes late, but she wasn't even sorry about it. She looked really good, so I guess she thought that made it acceptable, but it didn't for me. I understand that things happen and 20 minutes isn't that long, but if you feel so entitled to my time that you don't even feel bad, I'm out. She was upset. Story 96. A long time ago, I sat down with a girl at a bar. She approached me to flirt and start a conversation. After 10 minutes, I discovered she was the best friend of my ex, just trying to check on me and win me back. Story 97. I felt pessimistic and didn't want to challenge or be combative about the opinions she expressed. The lack of humor was a significant turnoff. Story 98. One of my friends told me about a date where the guy arrived 30 minutes late, didn't apologize, and then spent the entire time talking about his ex. She said it felt more like a therapy session than a date. So, she got up, told him she wasn't the right match and left. Story 99. I spent 2 days talking to a really pretty girl on Tinder who looks like a 9. I'm a 5 on good days. Although I should never have gone on a date, the conversation went well, and it is true that the mind does not understand the hint. Hint 1. Day 1. I'm going to wash my dishes right after eating. I don't want any more cockroach infestations. Hint 2. Day 2. My rehabilitation helped me a lot. Hint 3. For a brunch date. She showed up in pajamas and a sweatshirt. While looking at the menu, I was already a bit uncomfortable. She casually mentioned, I have another date here for lunch, and then I'm going to a restaurant for dinner on another date in the evening. I thought it wasn't going to work out and left. Turns out she had been or still was an unemployed addict. To this day, she is one of the most beautiful girls I matched with. Story 100. I walked out before the date began. I saw a poorly dressed man with greasy hair and messy facial hair walking in from the parking lot. I was dressed nicely and looked put together. While his face matched the profile picture, the rest did not. I wasn't about to let the whole coffee shop watch me die inside when he introduced himself, so I left before he even got to the door. Story 101. She needed to address it immediately and bluntly asked, Foreskin, yes or no? I didn't answer and she never found out. Story 102. She had pictures on her dating profile from when she was about 50 pounds lighter. I don't mind if someone is heavier, but I was furious because of the dishonesty and left after I ordered. Story 103. I did this just a few weeks ago, and I still feel bad. We had been chatting for a month before going out. He seemed to be everything I was looking for in a man. 6 feet 3 inches tall and a lawyer. However, a few days leading up to the date, I got a bad feeling for some reason. It was a Friday at 7 p.m. for dinner, and he was 20 minutes late, which didn't really bother me because the wait was an hour long. When I saw him, I felt disappointed by his appearance. During the 40 minutes we waited for our table, the conversation was even more disappointing. For someone who had been a lawyer for years, he did not know how to hold a conversation. I knew things weren't going to progress, so 5 minutes before our table was ready, I apologized, told him I didn't feel things were going to go anywhere, wished him the best, and left. I feel bad for doing that since he was a really nice guy. But I am glad that I stood up for myself, especially since I've had a hard time doing that in the past. Story 104. I wasn't really on a date, but I did leave a girl I was seeing for a while. We were in my car and heading to her place when she asked if we could stop at a bank. While she was inside, I sent her a cute little text, not realizing that her phone was right next to me in the car. I looked down at the phone as it chimed and saw that my contact was saved as a restaurant name or something similar. I was furious but kept my cool, and as soon as she opened the passenger side door, I handed her phone to her and told her she received a text from whatever restaurant it was, which made her jaw drop. I drove home afterward. It was during the day and just a few blocks away from her place, so I wasn't worried about her safety. I wasn't going to simply accept being a side piece. Story 105. I showed up and she was 200 pounds heavier than her Tinder photos. I was as kind as possible, bought her dinner, and explained that honesty is important to me. Story 106. She tried to order the chicken fettuccine after selecting a different main course, knowing that she would take it to go so the guy she was seeing could eat on my dime. I never took a woman out to dinner on a first date again. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.